It's strange how a single sentence can change everything you believe about love, loyalty, and family. I still remember sitting across from my mom that evening. The sun was slipping behind our backyard fence, and my acceptance letter to Columbia University lay open on the kitchen table. My hands were shaking, and so was my heart. It had been my dream since I was 12, journalism, New York, a life that meant something. "Mom," I said softly, "the deadline for tuition payment is next week. If we don't pay, they'll give my place to someone else." She didn't look at me at first, just kept stirring the soup on the stove like it was the most important thing in the world. Then finally she sighed, "Vanessa, honey, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. We can't afford it right now." Her voice was slow, heavy, rehearsed. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You said last month that Dad's insurance payout cleared. That should cover." "Things have changed," she interrupted. "We're having some financial issues. Your father's company cut his hours again. We need to be practical." Practical. That word stung like salt in an open wound. I stared at her, searching for any sign of guilt or warmth in her eyes, but she just looked tired, or maybe indifferent. She reached out, patted my hand, and said the line that would echo in my head for months to come. "Maybe you can take a gap year. Work, save some money. College isn't going anywhere." That night, I cried silently into my pillow, thinking maybe she was right. Maybe I was asking for too much, but that illusion shattered exactly 2 weeks later. I was scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break at the diner where I worked. I wiped tables, refilled coffee cups, smiled at strangers for tips, all to save for my dream that now seemed so far away. Then I saw a post from my brother's account, a shiny red Tesla gleaming in our driveway. The caption read, "Can't believe it. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Best surprise ever." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. I zoomed in on the picture. My mom was standing right next to him, smiling ear to ear, holding the car keys like she'd just won a game show. I dropped my phone. The customers around me turned when the sound echoed, but I didn't care. My whole world had just tilted. When I got home that night, the Tesla was there parked like a monument to betrayal. My brother Jake was showing it off to his friends, revving the engine, laughing. My mom stood on the porch, waving proudly. "Vanessa, isn't it beautiful?" she said when she saw me. I could barely answer. "I thought you said we couldn't afford my tuition." Her smile faltered for half a second, then returned, colder. "Jake needs a reliable car for work. It's different." Different. That word joined practical in my personal dictionary of pain. I walked past her, straight to my room, closed the door, and let the silence swallow me. I remember staring at my acceptance letter on the wall, the one I'd pinned there months ago, full of hope. It looked like a ghost now. That night, I made a decision. If my own family wouldn't believe in me, I'd build a life they could never ignore. The next morning, I applied for a scholarship program run by an independent journalism nonprofit in Chicago. It wasn't Columbia, but it was something. I didn't tell my parents. They didn't deserve to know. For months, I worked double shifts, morning classes at community college, evenings at the diner. I wrote articles at night, sending them to small online publications, hoping someone would notice. Most of them got rejected, but one didn't. A small local newspaper published my piece about housing discrimination. The editor liked my writing. He offered me a part-time internship. It was the first time in a long time that I felt seen. I remember walking home that evening, the city lights reflecting on the wet streets, and thinking maybe this was the universe's way of telling me I didn't need my parents' help to become who I was meant to be. But fate wasn't done with me yet. 3 months later, my mom called. "Vanessa, we need to talk." Her tone was softer than usual, almost nervous. "Your father's having some trouble with taxes. We might need to borrow a little money, just until things stabilize." I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "You want money from me? Well," she said hesitantly, "you've been working. You probably have some savings. You're good with managing money. You've always been responsible." It was the first time in years she'd used the word responsible about me. I almost admired her audacity. I wanted to scream, but instead I said calmly, "I'll think about it." That night, I sat on my tiny bed, staring at my bank statement. I'd saved a decent amount, not much, but enough for independence. And I thought about Jake, driving around town in his Tesla, taking selfies, living carefree while I worked my soul out. So I decided I wouldn't lend them a cent, but I also wouldn't just say no. I'd show them what real responsibility looked like. 2 weeks later, my internship turned into a full-time job. The editor who believed in me introduced me to an investor running a small digital media startup. They were looking for someone young, smart, and relentless. That was me, and I said yes. Within 6 months, I had my own apartment, small but mine. My articles started getting traction online. People were sharing my work. I even got invited to speak on a podcast about young journalists making a difference. It was surreal. Then one day, I got another call from home, this time from Jake. His voice sounded anxious. "Hey, sis, Mom's been asking about you. She, wanted me to tell you she's proud of you." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because pride doesn't come after betrayal, it comes before it, when you believe in someone even when it's inconvenient. A week later, my mom herself called again. "Vanessa," she said, "your brother's Tesla payments have become too much. We might have to sell it." I smiled quietly. "That's too bad. Maybe you can ask Columbia University for help." "Oh wait, you never paid them." She didn't say anything for a while, then finally a whisper, "I made mistakes." I didn't reply, because forgiveness is earned, not requested. By then, my startup had grown and I'd been promoted to managing editor. I was mentoring interns who reminded me of myself, hopeful, determined, scared but brave. And in the quiet moments, I'd think about that kitchen table where it all started, the soup, the silence, the lie. If only she believed in me back then, we could have shared this success together. But instead, I carried it alone, and somehow that made it even more precious. That's life's cruel poetry. Sometimes the people who break you end up teaching you how to stand tall. And as I looked out my office window at the city lights of Chicago, I whispered to myself, they said they couldn't afford my future. Turns out they just couldn't afford to see me win. Subscribe. Because sometimes success is the sweetest revenge. The next time I saw my parents in person was almost a year after that call. By then, I was living in Chicago full-time, working 12-hour days, building a name that people actually recognized. There were mornings when I'd open my inbox and see emails from readers saying, "Your story inspired me to stand up for myself." Those messages were my real family now, because the one I was born into had already shown me how small their love was when money got involved. It was late autumn when Mom called again. Her voice carried that same fragile guilt I'd learned to decode. "Vanessa," she said, "Dad and I are coming to Chicago next week. We'd like to see you, maybe dinner." I hesitated. A part of me still ached for them, the little girl who once wanted her mom to be proud, her dad to say, "That's my daughter." But the woman I'd become wasn't that fragile anymore. So I said, "Sure, let's meet." We agreed on a small restaurant downtown, the kind of cozy spot that plays slow jazz and smells like roasted garlic. When they walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. Dad looked older, thinner, his hair grayer than I remembered. Mom's face had that stretched politeness people wear when they're about to ask for something. They hugged me, and for a second, I almost felt warmth, but it was gone as soon as she spoke. "You look great, honey. We've been keeping up with your articles. You're doing so well." I smiled politely. "Thanks, I worked hard for it." We ordered dinner, small talk, weather, work, Jake's engagement. I waited because I knew there was something else coming. There always was. Finally, after dessert, Mom cleared her throat. "So, Vanessa, we're in a bit of a bind. The mortgage payments are piling up, and the bank," I held up my hand, "let me guess, you need money." Her eyes flickered with guilt, "Just a little help, until Dad's situation stabilizes." I leaned back, folded my arms, and studied her. A year ago, that plea would have shattered me. I would have done anything to feel loved, to prove I was still their daughter. But now I understood something powerful. Family love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for people who never show up for you. "Mom," I said slowly, "do you remember when you told me you couldn't afford my tuition?" She blinked, "Of course, that was a difficult time. And then you bought Jake a Tesla." Her mouth opened, no words came out. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I continued, voice calm but sharp. "You told me we were broke. You let me give up my dream. I scrubbed tables and lived off coffee for months while you posted pictures of a car. I forgave that silently, but now you're sitting here asking me to bail you out again. Vanessa, please, she whispered. We didn't mean what? To teach me that I wasn't worth as much as a car. Silence, just the hum of music and clinking of silverware from nearby tables. Then I leaned forward, softer this time. You know what's funny? The only thing that ever saved me was the pain you gave me, because it forced me to grow up. I opened my purse, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. Her eyes widened. What's this? Open it, I said. She slowly unsealed it, hands trembling. Inside was a check. $50,000. Mom gasped. Vanessa, we can't relax, I said. It's not for you to spend. It's a reminder. That's exactly how much you said you didn't have for my future, but somehow found for Jake's car. I want you to see what hard work, not favoritism, can create. Tears welled up in her eyes. Sweetheart, I made mistakes. Yeah, I said softly, you did, and I used every single one of them as fuel. Dad finally spoke, voice hoarse. We were trying to keep the family together. You have no idea how hard things were. I looked at him, calm but cold. You kept the family together for Jake. You made sure his world never cracked. Mine had to shatter before I could rebuild it. They both looked small now, sitting across from me, the same people who once made me feel invisible. Take the check, I said, but don't cash it, frame it. Hang it somewhere you can see every day, so you remember that your daughter, the one you left behind, became the one who stood on her own. She didn't move for a while, just stared at the paper like it was something holy. Then she whispered, Vanessa, can we start over? I took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to say yes, to melt into the arms I'd missed for so long, but I knew that kind of forgiveness wasn't honest yet. So I said, maybe someday, but not today. When I left the restaurant, the air was cold, the city lights hazy through the fog. I felt lighter than I had in years, not because I'd finally gotten revenge, but because I'd finally let go of needing their approval. A few months later, something strange happened. Jake called me out of nowhere. His voice was quiet, almost humble. Hey sis, Mom told me what happened. I'm sorry, I didn't know everything. I didn't say much, just listened. He told me how their finances had fallen apart, how the Tesla got repossessed, how they were selling the house. For a moment, I almost pitied them. But then I realized this wasn't my burden anymore. Before hanging up, I told him something that surprised even me. I don't hate you, Jake, but I don't owe you either. Take care of them if you can. That's your turn now. That night, I sat by my window, watching the lights dance on the Chicago River. For years, I thought revenge would feel like victory, sharp, satisfying, like justice served cold. But instead, it felt peaceful, quiet, because real revenge isn't about making them pay, it's about showing them they never had the power to stop you. And for the first time, I smiled, not the smile of triumph, but the smile of freedom. I picked up my journal and wrote the last line of my next article. When they said they couldn't afford my future, they were right, because my future was too expensive for their small dreams. I closed the notebook, exhaled deeply, and whispered to myself, I'm finally home. Subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is living your truth louder than their lies. It's strange, isn't it, how peace doesn't come when people apologize, but when you finally stop waiting for them to. Months passed after that dinner. I focused on work, on writing stories that mattered: corruption, injustice, resilience. The kind of stories that reminded me of my own. My words started gaining traction online. People began recognizing my name. For the first time, I wasn't Vanessa, the forgotten daughter. I was Vanessa Clark, the journalist who never gave up. But success doesn't erase scars. It only teaches you how to live with them. One evening, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. No return address, just my name, written in shaky cursive. When I opened it, a folded photograph slipped out. It was my parents' house. The for sale sign stood crooked in the lawn. On the back, in Mom's handwriting, it said, We're moving. If you ever want to visit, you'll always have a place with us. No apology, no explanation, just that. I sat there staring at it, my mind a storm of emotions. Part of me wanted to tear it apart. Another part wanted to believe it meant something, so I didn't throw it away. I put it in a box with the old acceptance letter from Columbia and the first article I ever wrote. Pieces of my past tucked away neatly, like lessons I no longer needed to hold every day. Life went on. I built my name higher, became a senior editor, started mentoring young writers who came from broken families like mine. I saw myself in their hungry eyes, that mix of pain and hope. I told them the same thing I'd learned the hard way. You don't need to be loved to be believed in. Start with yourself. Then, one winter morning, I got a call from Jake again. His voice sounded different this time. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "Mom's not well. She's in the hospital." The words hit harder than I expected. All the anger, all the resentment, it didn't disappear, but it softened. Because deep down, I knew that no matter how much hurt there was, she was still my mother, and some bonds, no matter how cracked, never completely break. When I walked into the hospital room, she looked smaller than I remembered. Pale, fragile, her eyes fluttered open when she saw me. "Vanessa," she whispered, voice trembling. "You came?" I nodded. "Yeah, I came." For a while, there was silence, the kind that carries years of words left unsaid. Finally, she spoke. "I read your articles, every one of them. You became everything I wanted to be, but was too scared to try." That single sentence made my chest tighten. I didn't know whether to cry or to stay strong. So I just sat beside her, holding her hand, the same hand that once pointed at me, saying, "We can't afford you." After a long pause, she said softly, "You were right, about everything. The car, the choices, the way I treated you. I thought I was protecting you by being practical. I didn't realize I was breaking you." I swallowed hard. "You didn't just break me, Mom. You made me rebuild." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm sorry." And for the first time, those words didn't feel hollow, because this time she meant them. I squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay, you don't owe me anything anymore. I've already forgiven you, I just didn't know it until now." She smiled weakly. "Your father, he misses you too." Dad stepped into the room a moment later. He looked older, humbled. He didn't say much, just walked up and placed a small box on my lap. When I opened it, I froze. Inside was a small gold locket, the one I'd lost when I was 16. I kept it. He said quietly, "You dropped it in the garden one night. I thought you'd come looking for it, but you never did." I held it in my hand, feeling the faint weight of years, the scent of earth, memory, regret. In that moment, all the bitterness faded, not because I forgot, but because I finally understood. They had made mistakes, but so had I in expecting them to love me the way I loved them. Love isn't about fairness, it's about forgiveness. Over the next few weeks, I visited often. Mom slowly recovered. We talked more, not about money or mistakes, but about simple things: her garden, the books I was reading, the articles she liked. Sometimes silence said everything words couldn't. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "I saw Jake's old Tesla ad online. Someone else is driving it now. I guess that's what happens when you buy things you can't afford. You end up losing what really matters." I smiled gently. "Yeah, but sometimes losing what doesn't matter helps you find what does." She laughed softly. "You really did turn out smarter than me." "I had to," I said. "You gave me no choice." Her laughter faded, but her eyes glistened with pride. And that was enough. Months later, when she finally came home, I helped her settle into a smaller house outside the city. It wasn't grand, but it was peaceful. As I left, she handed me the same check I'd once given her at the restaurant, the one I told her not to cash. "I kept it," she said. "You were right. It reminded me every day of what I almost lost." I smiled, folded it carefully, and said, "Keep it again." But this time not as guilt, as proof that we survived. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Driving back to Chicago that night, I rolled down the window and let the cold air hit my face. The city skyline shimmered ahead, a symbol of everything I'd built from nothing. And I thought about that scared girl crying over college tuition once upon a time. She didn't get Columbia. She didn't get her parents' support, but she got herself. And sometimes that's the only thing that truly saves you. When I reached home, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started writing my next story. The headline read, "The Cost of Love: How Families Measure Worth in Dollars and Decisions." It wasn't just another article, it was closure. As I typed the final sentence, I whispered into the quiet room, Mom said she couldn't afford my future. Turns out it was never hers to buy. And then, with a soft smile, I added the final line I always do, not for my readers, but for myself. Subscribe, because sometimes revenge isn't about payback, it's about peace.